Greetings, my friends, and today we are going to look at another video from Foundry. The last ones I really enjoyed, they add a lot to offer, and I hope I did too. But now it is time to talk about a serious subject, cosmic horror. Instead of cosmic horror, they have referred to it as cosmic bliss. So, what might the reason be for calling it cosmic bliss, you ask? Well, cosmicism does allow for our actions to be basically inconsequential, so technically you don't feel bad, nor do you feel like you are being left out of some grand narrative when. So, I think that is what they were going for with cosmic bliss. Why shouldn't you be blissful when nothing really matters? You can just turn to hedonism and you can spend your days uh, attempting to achieve the largest amount of pleasure, I guess. But either way, let us get into the video. Without further ado,
on this channel, we are no strangers to some good old cosmic horror. We love our eldritch space entities, our seas writhing with untold monstrosities, our horrific and forgotten origin stories. It's always fun to stare the ineffable in the face and grapple with our own cosmically minuscule scale, if even just for a moment. There aren't many other genres out there that can make you feel so much like an ant on the pavement, a mote of dust on the wind. It's a unique, almost devastating brand of horror, and yet, every time we make a video about it, we get comments from people just saying outright that it's not scary, which has always felt weird to me given the gravity of the material. I mean, this is a genre that wants to upend your entire concept of self, if not your reality, and you somehow find that less scary than this? My first impulse is, of course, just to argue the point, because surely, if they really understood why it was scary, it would be scary to them.
so I don't think that's the case. Well, here's the thing, everyone has different sensibilities, so what scares one person could even be humorous to another. And besides, some people just don't feel the existential dread that is intended through cosmic horror media. They don't, or they can't even comprehend that, I guess. Because, I mean, just look at religious people, they don't really need justification. They believe in God, so they don't even think about how rare life is and how much coincidences got us here. They just give it up to God. Everything is God, and that's it. So basically, people who are not willing to open up their minds, and sometimes just regular people, because the different sensibilities, can find cosmic horror not that terrifying. But me, on the other hand, I loved cosmic horror. It just gave me a sense of freedom and really made me part of the background, I guess. I just felt like part of the background of the universe, so pointless nonsense that will last only a short amount of time, and that has lifted a lot of burdens from me. But although I do attempt to keep myself grounded.
But, I don't think that's it. In fact, the more I think about it, the more that sort of indifference really starts to make sense. In fact, I think there's even a point at which cosmic horror might go so far beyond scary that it loops back around and becomes almost blissful.
Okay, this comes down to one of those quotes, right? It is not eldritch horrors that crawl out of the ocean. What terrifies me? What terrifies me is that nothing will change and I will have to live out a mundane life. Like someone who seeks adventure and all those just being denied because nothing is real and everything is just doesn't even have to make sense. Things just exist and so on and so forth.
A 14-part video series you can watch for free that I think will really help. It certainly helped me. The Creative
Skillshare.
Writing Bootcamp. Now you can get access. A big thanks to us has been a great job illustrating how cosmic horror works. In fact, we pretty much made a whole video about it last year, but the short version is this. An explorer finds his way into the subterranean ruins of a fabled city so old, its name has been lost to time. The further he goes, the stranger it gets. Architecture unfit for humans, glass coffins with unspeakably strange corpses inside, and finally, in the darkest, deepest reaches of the place, a radiant white void that calls out to him from within a great door. He's drawn toward it as if by a strong wind, and just before he's pulled inside, just as he begins to make out the grotesque faces of the unnameable creatures beyond, the door slams shut, and he is plunged blessedly back into darkness. I like this example a lot because it doesn't really hide behind a monster. Yes, there are technically monsters within the Radiant Void, but their description is kind of just a malevolent jumble of words, impossible to really fathom or make sense of. If there were more of a discrete monster, like Cthulhu or the Elder Things, it would be easy to mistake the threat they pose to your life as the source of the horror. And yes, I suppose the threat of death is indeed very existential.
But the implications, yes, I'm sorry if I posed that most inconvenient moment. The implications are what's more terrifying about cosmic horror. Like, nothing matters and anything can be. Because at the mountains of madness, well, we are taught that there was a war between alien races before even we were created, and the creation of our species was basically sewage that these creatures left out and that evolved into humans today. Now finally we find that, well, these creatures have existed before us and hold much more significance in the scale of the universe. And what if something comes looking for them and we are in the crossfires of this battle? Yes, something like that, leaving humanity hopeless and a possible victim to otherworldly forces.
But it's also obvious. The Nameless City forces us to focus on the deeper elements of cosmic horror, the ways in which it threatens your sanity and your self-concept. The explorer of the Nameless City says of his experience, "I must always remember and shiver in the night wind until oblivion or worse claims me. Monstrous, unnatural, colossal was the thing, too far beyond the ideas of man to be believed, except in the silent, damnable small hours when one cannot sleep." Even he questions what he experienced, barely able to believe it except when in a dreamy, delirious half-slumber. After an experience like that, how could you ever quite trust your senses again? Wouldn't you have a strange feeling that everything might be a little untrue, less real? And even if you were able to accept it, what would this revelation imply about your place in the cosmos? The fact that there are terrible truths you will never understand, hidden in the deep, dark places, created by intelligences who roamed the earth the ages before man ever came gasping from the sea? It's enough to make you feel like a hapless grain of sand in the desert of deep time. Maybe, or maybe it just doesn't feel like much at all. Maybe, to you, this story is tantamount to a spelunker finding a weird thing in a cave and way overreacting to it. Maybe the revelation of the nameless city and its radiant void just don't really mean anything to you, and you have to wonder how people really manage to find a story like this scary.
So I did lightly touch upon this, but why is a story like that scary? Well, again, I'll have to refer to the way it is presented and the implications that can be made by observing what we are given. For an example, uh, now the nameless city is terrifying because it is completely unknown and defies logic itself through the buildings and the radiant murals and coffins of things that have since glass coffins of things that have passed and everything like that. So we can infer that there probably was something here right next to us for a long time. How long? We have no idea. And did they all go extinct or did they just go underground? Did they perhaps evolve into a different form and join society or something like that? That has potential, and that is why normally someone would have a horror based reaction to this. But I can understand those who are like, well, it's just a mirror in a weird place. But I just prefer to look at the individual elements of a story and come to the conclusions on my own. Sometimes those conclusions are wildly weird and makes no sense, but I enjoy coming to conclusions based on facts that are given. Okay, moving on.
If that's the case, I really can't blame you, because I think there's something going on beneath the surface here, and it really does work on different people in different ways. To me, this isn't actually about cosmic horror at all. It's about the thing that ultimately makes cosmic horror work. That unspeakable, ineffable, glorious, world shatteringly massive something that manages to obliterate your sanity and your self concept. In a word, the sublime. That might sound a little strange to you by today's standards. The way you've probably heard sublime used was just to describe something exceedingly good. That meal was sublime, you might hear someone say, or this view is simply sublime. But the term actually has a long history of philosophical thought behind it. It's definitely more than just an adjective. A lot more, actually. It's kind of hard to grasp. How can I put this simply? Imagine this. You're on a small boat in the middle of the ocean. Everywhere you look, in every direction, nothing but waves lapping at the horizon. You don't know exactly how deep the water reaches beneath you, but it might as well be an endless void from where you are, staring at its gently rolling surface. On this sliver of placid gravity between the endlessly open sky and the endlessly yawning water beneath you, the sense is one of overwhelming vastness. You have no choice but to notice just how small you are. It's always somewhere in the back of your mind. Traveling out to sea is both a pleasure and a risk.
Okay, this is sounding a lot like megalophobia, the fear of large things. And of course, there are other things that might bring this kind of fear, like what was that named again? Agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces, all kinds of horrors. And we attempt to bring normies into these weird niche horrors through telling stories, I guess, so everyone can understand them. For an example, imagine how an arachnophobe might feel when a spider climbs on their back. A regular person without arachnophobia might not feel the same way. If instead of one spider we just dumped a bucket of spiders on a person, then they might feel arachnophobia. It's kind of like that, magnified and concentrated to deliver a certain experience. That is what horror is meant to do. At least that's my interpretation of it.
But you knew that. That's part of what makes it worth doing. So here you are, tiny in the vastness of the sea, and then, out of nowhere, as you're admiring the view, a black figure rises up out of the sea beside you, blotting out the sun, casting its great shadow over you. No, not Cthulhu, not Dagon. A whale. A real living creature larger than any other you've seen in your life, and it's just 30 meters away. Here, in this moment, heart pounding in your chest, boat rocking on the disturbed surface of the water, you feel yourself caught between two extremes. Your brain registers immediately that you might die here, that this creature could end your entire life without even noticing, just by surfacing in the wrong place. At the same time, so close to this impossibly large thing, close enough that you can feel the salt spray of its breach on your face, you somehow feel more alive than ever. That is the experience of the sublime. At least, that's how the 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke used the term. To him,
Okay, that is interesting, I guess. Fascinating detail. I don't know much to say about that. Okay, I guess people are thrill seekers uh, in every medium, and books are just another one of those mediums. So,
him, the word meant greatness. It did not, however, mean beauty. In fact, in his writing, he associates it far more with terror than anything else. He says, when danger or pain press too nearly, they are incapable of giving any delight and are simply terrible. But at certain distances, and with certain modifications, they may be, and they are, beautiful, as we every day experience. You know the whale is a horrific danger to you, that you would be powerless against the force it represents, and at the same time, being able to observe it in all its great vastness from your boat?
but to be fair, this is a lot of megalophobia, right? Uh, the idea of gigantic things and how insignificant people feel after witnessing them. It is truly terrifying that such gigantic creatures exist. And there's also the colossal squid. That is also a very large thing.
What an incredible experience, like nothing else in the world. I find this interesting because it sort of paints a spectrum of emotions. On the one hand, we have terror, on the other, we have pleasure, and presumably, between the two, we have something unaffected and neutral. We already get cosmic horror, that's the terror side of this. The whale could end your life without noticing it. You are a grain of sand in the desert of deep time. You are cosmically insignificant and unfit to fathom everything you see. That's one possible reaction to encountering the sublime. Then, toward the middle of our spectrum, you might feel not a sense of cosmic horror, but a sense of cosmic indifference. So what if you're that vulnerable to this massive sea creature? Why does the scale of your life against the scale of deep time even matter? Who said the cosmos has to care or that you have to understand it? When confronted with the sublime, it isn't unreasonable for your emotions to simply shut off. It might even be a good coping mechanism to prevent you from spiraling off into an existential episode. A way to acknowledge, but not succumb to, the sublime. And then we get to the far end of the spectrum. Beyond cosmic horror, beyond cosmic indifference, if you are lucky, you may have the opportunity to experience cosmic bliss. We all know about H.P. Lovecraft and his brand of horror, but while he was working on giving us nightmares, one of his friends was busy exploring a more hopeful side of this fiction. In the story The City of the Singing Flame by Clark Ashton Smith, the famous writer Giles Angarth finds his way into a realm unlike any on Earth, a place carpeted with violet grass, bathed in the glow of a sunless amber sky.
Sounds like Slime Rancher. Sorry, I had to. But Slime Rancher is a very comforting game. I should probably play the second game. I really like the first game. Okay, I'm sorry for just randomly putting that in there. And of course, Moriocho also has uh, purple grass.
And permeated through with music. The music seems to glide on the air itself, beckoning to him. And of course, he falls.
Dude, this is exactly like the crystal desert from Slime Rancher. Like empty desert full of relics and destroyed structures. The only things that are remaining are slimes. I'm just excited to play slimes. Play slimes? I don't think I can play slimes. Play with them, I guess. Okay.
Follows. In a dreamlike trance, he wanders through a beautiful city of benevolent, statue-like giants, into a vast temple at the city's heart, and at last to the song's source, a fountain of radiant green flame suspended above a pit. And around it are gathered countless visitors like him, improbable creatures of every possible description, pilgrims from who knows what strange dimensions. Enthralled by the music, many of them begin to hurl themselves into the fire. Angarth himself begins to feel the same compulsion and leaves before it can drive him to
Why is Monica there though? Okay, whatever.
self-immolation. But before long, the allure of the flame and its beautiful song become too powerful in his mind, and he finds that he can think of little else. He can't even write fiction anymore, which is his entire career. So he returns, but decides to bring his illustrator friend with him this time. And when his friend, confronted by the beauty of the flame and its song, gives in to the compulsion and throws himself into the flame, Angarth soon decides that he wishes for the same rapture. As he describes it, the flaming doom whose brief instant was better than eons of mortal life. He cannot return home, cannot even make his art anymore. He has witnessed the sublime, bewitching glory of the singing flame, and will only be satisfied when he, too, has joined it. If you think about it, this story is strikingly similar to the Nameless City. An explorer in a strange place finds himself face to face with the sublime. Both the radiant void of the Nameless City and the singing flame offer the same dangers. They both threaten the existence of anyone who enters them, the sanity of anyone who observes them, and the self-concept of anyone who experiences them. But you'll notice, the framing is very different. In one of the stories, all of these are indeed interpreted as threats.
Of course, the thing about cosmic horror, this is a very fascinating detail. It is most likely going to come from the perspective that we are human, but there are perspectives like we are the monsters and the beings greater than humans, and those are really interesting too. For comparison, imagine a citadel of eldritch beings that spend their lives overlooking the lesser beings and making sure every universe just stays the same level without collapsing and all that. That would just be an interesting idea too. Like through their perspective, we get to see humans, how they are just insignificant at first, then they learn that, well, these people aren't exactly bad. They have bad attributes about them, but they are people overall, and they are limited in certain abilities and capacities. But this being decides to allow humanity to exist, something like that. That does feel a little like three body problem, but it is different from it significantly.
But in the other, they're interpreted almost as gifts. Instead of existential dread at the prospect of ceasing to exist, the singing flame offers something almost merciful. Dissolution not as death, but as a release from this ongoing existential crisis called life. A beautiful, musical, compassionate exit alongside so many others. It's probably a little hard to wrap your head around because, of course, you want to keep living. Human biology screams against the idea of death, so it's weird to see it made even a little bit desirable. The book Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer approaches this in a really interesting way. Early in the story, the main character inhales a spore from a strange fungus. As it grows within her, it gradually shifts from being described as an infection to something far stranger. A sort of brightness gradually overtaking her. She can feel herself changing, the person she was gradually receding. And it feels good, like a release from so many of her problems. Near the story's end, a dying character even describes her as, quote, a slow burning flame, a will-o'-the-wisp, floating across the marsh and the dunes, floating and floating, like nothing human, but something free and floating. Just like all those pilgrims in the temple, like Angarth's friend, like Angarth himself in the end, this woman is consumed, gone. And it's kind of wonderful for her. Instead of madness at the prospect of one's concept of reality being upended, the singing flame offers liberation from the confines of a hitherto limited and banal existence. In the first book of the Angelarium series by Peter Moorbacher, a man ascends into the abstracted, heavenly realm of the divine, where he confronts the world tree. It is all things. Every piece of reality, every life that ever was, is contained within the lines of its bark, the twisting of its branches. Anxious about the earthly life he left behind, he tries to see the lives of his mortal family in the bark, but it's overwhelming and he falls into despair. At this, Raziel, the angel of mysteries, says to him, "Do not seek to understand, simply stand witness." Just as the flame offers freedom from preconceptions of the value of life and individuality to Angarth,
Of course, this is like the other part, right? Uh, Cosmicism allows us to, well, we won't know everything about everything, but we can find enjoyment in searching for things and discovering new things. That itself is a gift that we should cherish instead of attempting to explain and understand everything.
now this man, standing amidst the divine, is offered the opportunity to let go and allow the truth to wash over him, whether he can make sense of it or not. Instead of cosmic insignificance at the prospect of your tiny life against the immensity of all time and existence, the singing flame offers exaltation. The opportunity, if only for a beautiful transitory moment, to be part of the sublime, rather than just its observer. The story In the Hills, the Cities by Clive Barker is perhaps my favorite example of this in fiction. We even did an entire video on it last year. The short version is that, after discovering that an entire town of people has managed to turn itself into a wayward colossus of human bodies, one of the main characters chases the giant down in a frenzy and climbs onto it to become a part of it. Although the giant is doomed to die and there is no way this character will survive the journey, he feels he has no other choice. Quote, anything to catch this passing miracle and be a part of it. Better to go with it wherever it was going, serve its purpose, whatever that might be. Better to die with it than live without it. Sounds eerily similar to what Angarth said, doesn't it? How, in the end, he longed for that flaming doom whose brief instant was better than eons of mortal life. So, if you're not afraid of cosmic horror, that's okay. You don't really have to be for it to be effective. Although the sublime is, as Burke said, fundamentally terrifying, that terror can also be the foundation for other powerful emotions. Maybe when you encounter these ineffable things, larger than life, larger than your mind's ability to properly fathom, instead of responding with fear or pushing it out of your brain entirely, you can allow yourself to experience something transcendent. A thrill at the possibility of release, a sudden longing for liberation, a real chance at exaltation. Maybe next time you confront the sublime, instead of cosmic horror, you could be feeling cosmic bliss.
Yeah, I guess I started feeling that to, I guess, but I started feeling that when global warming and shit like that uh, started to make sense. Now it's like dying world. Well, not exactly dying world. People will survive, but most will not. And well, what am I to do, right? All I can do is leave a legacy behind. I mean, I would have done that either way, I guess. At least my thoughts can remain a bit longer and provide solace to someone who feels similarly and, you know, relate to.
Now, of course, the best way to experiment with this would be to try writing a little bit of it yourself.
Okay, so Skillshare, right? Yeah, go check out Skillshare, I guess, through his link. I like his videos, his impressive work, high effort content. Now, why don't you give a thumbs up to his video? And while you are at it, give a thumbs up to mine too. And subscribe, because our journey into cosmic horror is just beginning. And I promise you, the next one will be a sight to behold, I guess. But before that, I must tell you, if you like to see something being reacted to, you can always let me know in the comments. Don't post links, but I will check out the things you are talking about. Just name them below. Thank you for watching. I truly am grateful.